everyone, and welcome to Read This Now, the weekly webcast where Brad, Gustafson, and I share 2 books that we love and we think you should read. When, Brad?
Right now. For a second, I was picturing kind of like Star Wars, the stars coming at us, but it was the Read This Now call sign coming at you.
I love it.
Oh my gosh, I feel like a squirrel sometimes. Jen, I promised I'm more focused during the school day at work. There's something about reading joy and connecting with you that just brings out my distractibility.
You're my favorite squirrel, so keep it coming. I love it. I love it. What you been reading this week, my friend?
Oh my goodness. So you, I'm not even ashamed to say this anymore, but oftentimes, I'll be reading stuff and working on my to be read stack, and then you'll recommend books and I'll add to my stack. So sometimes I'm circling back to things you've recommended or shared months, if not years later. And this is a gem that you shared on this show. So maybe I'm almost endorsing our show. That's what I'm doing. Like, I get book recommendations from this show and from you. So there's my little hint just for you, but now just for everyone else.
Now I'm excited.
Yeah, let me just tell you a little bit about my book and then I'll unveil it. Okay. Jen, you'll get it right away. But here we go. So main character Zoe is a brilliant middle schooler and octopus guru, which basically means she knows everything about octopuses. And it's a really cool thing because throughout the DNA of the book, as the plot is naturally unfolding, she's making connections between her life and the trials and triumphs and survival mechanisms of octopuses. So it's neatly woven in, not in a cumbersome way, but it's a really cool thing how her expertise with this animal, the connection she makes. But with her brilliance, you would expect her to do really well in school, or at least I would as a principal, right? And here's an example. Let me just give you a quick story from the book. So in class, their class is having a debate, or technically I think they're writing papers on what the best animal is. And everyone listening right now is probably saying, well, Zoe's going for the octopus, right? Okay, you'd be right. Good call. But the problem is that's not a debate or a paper that she completed or won. She had some major problems with it. So then the question is, why? Why is a brilliant, passionate mind not being successful, especially with like assignments and work that almost seem custom created for her? And that's where the book gets incredibly powerful and real. And the thing I love most about this book is how several important life issues coalesced in a way that it wasn't just about Zoe's family trying to persevere in poverty, because that could have easily just been kind of the main thing, but that's not how I've seen life work. Like people work on and are faced with lots of different things. So poverty is part of her story that she's trying to navigate. Friends and the social aspect. There's also an element of domestic abuse and her family getting trapped into what seems like a really good situation initially. And Braden, by the way, the author, brilliantly unpacked this, by the way. I gotta share how she did this. Like at first, as this trailer that Zoe's living in and her family, it sounds like a dream. I mean, for Zoe, a dream situation. And not stepdad's not the right words. This person that Zoe and her mom and her siblings are living with, he sounds organized and clean and just all these things that Zoe has shared that she's not accustomed to. It sounds like a dream scenario. But Braden slowly unpacks things that are the opposite of a dream, very subtly, but it turns out to be like this nightmare situation. And the hard part about one of the hard parts about it is that according to Zoe, there's no hitting per se in this abusive situation, but her family is encountering other things with this person they're living with. So, and those are just a couple of the issues. But my whole point is, like, never before that I can remember have I seen a book kind of start out really good and above average, but yet then it's like, holy cow, a third of the way in, it gets it gets like the snowball gets bigger and more complex and nuanced to the point where I stayed up way too late a couple nights ago because I could not put the thing down. And I'm like literally not on I was laying down, but I felt like I was on the edge of the bed because there was a moment where instead of like relaxing where I should be, my heart rate was going up and I was like, what is going to happen? And I felt like I was there. Anyway, it is incredible. It is incredible. It is incredible. It's incredible. Now I'm on the lookout for Anne Braden because I think this is the first book I ever read of hers, and she has a puffin one out that maybe you talked about.
It's coming out. It's not out until April.
Okay.
But Brad, first of all, this is like the most exciting day of my life because I've been waiting for 2 years for you to read this book. Like I've just been waiting. Brad, read The Benefits of Being an Octopus.
Yes.
I knew when I read it that it had your name written all over it, that you absolutely would love it. And now I feel the like need to reach over to my bookshelf. So entertain our 3.5 viewers for 1 second because I want to get
while Jen is going to her bookshelf, I'll give you a glimpse into my family life. I've been going around my house the last couple of days, basically harassing my kids and wife. I'm like, you got to read this. You got to read this. You got to read this, to the point where I feel like they might be avoiding me in hallways now and stuff like that. Oh,
that is so funny.
Good.
I got to tell you, let me tell you a couple things. I'm going to make this all about me for a couple of seconds, but
go on.
I'm so happy that you read that book because that book is so special to me for a number of reasons. First and foremost, I want to make a confession because I've never done this before, Brad. When I read The Benefits of Being an Octopus, it was one of those things without, revealing sort of TMI. The mother's boyfriend, Lenny, I think the name is, the behavior that you talked about, and even some of the very specific details about Zoe's mom were like word for word identical to my own mother and some of the relationships she was in when she was alive. It felt like reading something that was like ripped from my own childhood. And I was so moved by it that I had never done this before. I reached out to the author and said, oh my gosh, like, I don't think I've ever experienced a book like this that felt so personal to me. It just really touched me in a really personal place. And so I had the opportunity to meet Anne Braden like a year later. And Brad, I'm telling you, this is how crazy this was. It was in a crowded convention center in Louisville, Kentucky. I will never remember it. I'll never forget it. We planned to meet on like the vendor hall, and literally I like walk up to her, she puts her arms around me, and I just start bawling. That is what happened. And I am like not a crier, like that's really not a thing I do. So that's a really super atypical, but I mention all that because for somebody who loves books and as a librarian, I really have a surprisingly few number of books that I keep myself. I get a lot of books and I give them all away. I very rarely keep them, but The Benefits of Being an Octopus is one that I keep on my shelf. Exactly. And my friend Tara Seletska, her school did a whole school read, a middle school, of this book because of the teacher. Is the teacher named Mrs. Rochambeau? Is that right?
Yes.
It's been a long time since I've read it.
Ms. Rochambeau.
Yes, remember how she sort of thinks she knows Zoe and kind of knows her situation, and then she sees Zoe out in her regular life, and suddenly it's like a more complete picture. Anyway, they read that as a staff, as sort of not the kids ended up reading it later, but they read it as a whole staff as a way to talk about how our kids have this whole life outside of school and how it affects them. And Tara made for all her staff members, and made one for me, stress balls. They're a stress ball, and I just love it. And then the last thing I'm going to share, since I'm like on a total Anne Braden like tear here, I've taken over your book talk completely.
I'm loving every second of it. Don't stop.
is that I have a arc that Anne sent me of The Flight of the Puffin, which is out in April, which you're going to love. You're going to love it. Get ready. Yeah, I'm telling you already. But I'm going to offer this as a teaser. The teacher in that book was inspiring to me. And so I'm just going to say I had this rock painted as a result of the teacher in that book. And I'm not going to tell you anything else about it. But once you read it, then it'll make more sense to you. So let me show that to the whole group. It says, create the world of your dreams. And there's a little puffin right there. So I'm a huge Anne Braden stan, and it's the happiest day of my life that you have read this now. I'm real excited, Brad.
Yeah, I feel really, really great. You know, sometimes you read a book and you feel like a better person or a more equipped educator, in addition to really enjoying the book. And that's how I felt about this. I really felt like it gave me some important perspective and story to help connect the dots and be more aware of like the kiddos I'm serving here would be another way to say it. So.
I love it. Hold up that beautiful cover one more time. So in case the people out there, isn't it gorgeous? I love it. I love it.
Yeah,
I got to tell you, Brad, I think if this were any other day, I might feel like ill-equipped to give a book talk after the one that you just provided, because it was so inspiring and I love the book so much. I would feel like, gosh, no other book is going to stand up to that and the excitement. Maybe we should just leave it at Anne Braden-a-thon. But I actually have a book to share that I think is sort of related in a way. It's another middle grade book that I found really emotionally compelling. It's out this year, and I think it's definitely going to, unless something crazy happens, I can't imagine it won't be one of my favorite books of the year. It's one of those books that I found myself wanting to slow down in because I was going through it very quickly and I needed to A, stop and sort of process it, and then B, just savor it a little bit because the language is so beautiful. The story is so poignant. I fell in love with the characters, and it's another middle grade novel about a girl. Her name is Reha, though, and she is growing up in the 80s. And as somebody who was a teenager in the 80s herself, I felt very nostalgic. There's lots of musical references listed in the book that were familiar to me at that same age. The one really horrifying part was knowing that some librarians were cataloging this book under historical fiction in their library, which made me feel about 112 years old. But before I go any farther, let me go ahead and reveal the book. It's called Red, White, and Whole. And it's by Rajani LaRocca. And I wanted to show this beautiful cover because, like the Anne Braden books, the cover is just really, really beautiful. But this is a novel in verse, which I've been reading a lot of lately. It seems like there's a lot of those, about this young girl who is a second generation American. Her family immigrated here from India. And again, it's in the 1980s, and Reha feels sort of stuck between two worlds as the book opens up. There's this part of her that, her life at school, which tends to include mostly people who are not Indian, wanting to be a typical American teenager. And then this life that she has at home, which is still very much rooted in the traditions that her family brought with her when they immigrated. And there's a conflict that seems to be set up between Reha and especially her mother, who holds her to very high standards and seems, in Reha's view, to want her to just be this perfect Indian daughter. But then life gets sort of turned upside down when her mother is diagnosed with leukemia. And I wanted to read one short poem that you can see is about halfway through the book. Because to me, this was one that just stuck with me and also sort of typifies the beauty of the language and also how accessible it is, because this is a book with some tough topics like the benefits of being an octopus, but it's written in a way that's really accessible for middle grade readers, fourth, fifth grade, etc. But this one is called The Moon. I also very much like that all the poems in this book have a title. And
that's awesome.
Yes, and so I really love that because it adds like another layer of meaning to me. Anyway, this one is called The Moon, and it's short. It says, my mother's name is Poonam, and that means moon. Her face is as bright as a full moon, always gentle, always changing, but predictable. Like our moon, she only shows us one face, the strong one. And, we know that mom is sick at that point. And for a lot of the next part of the book, the book sort of, to me, there's like a almost 3 distinct sections, even though it's not organized in that way. But for the next section of the book, it really is about Reha and her family trying to save their mother, their moon. And it's so beautifully done, how life can change on a dime, but then also about the strength and love and roots that your family gives you that persist, over time, no matter what happens. And how, even though sometimes you may not always understand your family, that over time you begin to realize the role that they played in shaping who you are. So I feel like I was reading on the publisher's website that they recommend this book for as young as 3rd grade. And I feel like from a language point of view, it probably is accessible for kids that young. But because of the subject matter, I would probably choose it as a read aloud for kids that young, or in 4th grade, so that there could be some conversation around what's happening. But it really is kind of the perfect, just sweet spot middle grade reader for that, like 5th to 7th grade, in the same way that being benefits of being an octopus is. So, and one other thing I was going to point out is I'll share it when I post this video, is that the author created this great playlist of 80s songs that she used as inspiration while writing the book, and I found that got a lot of joy out of it too. So I will share that as well in the video. But it's called Red, White, and Whole, which you can see is, now you see the reference to the moon, but also yes, also there's some reference there to blood. Since it's, since we're talking about leukemia, and there's lots of science in this book too for kids to kind of unpack. But it's Rajani LaRocca, and I think you should read it now.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh, so good. Boy, these are some powerhouse books this week.
I'm feeling very fulfilled right now, not only just from reading, but from what you just shared too. I feel like that would be a book a lot of kiddos and teachers and myself at our school would really appreciate on lots of different levels. So thank you for sharing that.
I was thinking about, as I was reading it, the picture book, and the name of it is escaping me right now. You'll probably be able to remind me. The picture book you shared about the boy going through cancer treatments and the transportation to get him to his treatments and all of that. I can't remember what it was called.
I think it was a ride with Emilio, or a ride for Emilio.
Yes. And I was just thinking about how books like this, I don't want to use the word normalize. I don't think they normalize those experiences so much as they just unpack and reveal them so that we can understand how they affect whole families. They're not, when someone in your family is diagnosed with a disease like that, really the whole family is diagnosed in a way. And in some ways the community too. So.
Oh, for sure.
Wow.
And yeah, so even as a school principal, mostly my experience with leukemia is caring for kiddos and families in our school over the years who have been battling that, or as a community, how we work together. It's not, it hasn't delved into the other side of it. So to me, it's invaluable to have other things, I don't know, to sharpen the radar, or be more empathetic. Yeah.
The other thing I'm just going to say is that a takeaway I have from today's conversation is that even books that deal with tough topics, the common threads or the connections, I guess, that they weave between people can feel really joyful. You said you felt really satisfied. I do too. And I feel really joyful, even though these books have some sad, tough moments. There's something about the way those stories connect us that I find very fulfilling.
Yeah. And so for example, in this book, I loved the fight of Zoe, the courage, so it really is a hope-filled book, that in the face of adversity and life, that we can raise each other up, and that other people are counting on us, and we can help build their capacity too. Like how I think Zoe has this effect on others, that she helps them find the courage in themselves. Like that's a really important thing that was woven throughout the story. And Anne does a great masterful job of she doesn't just say it, but through story and struggle and Zoe's impact, you as a reader, you start to connect the dots and notice that.
Agreed. And as someone who's read both books, I think Zoe and Ray Hall would be good friends. And
Oh,
I
cool.
love that. There's a lot of similarities between those characters.
Hey, that's a fun conversation for another day. I'd like to have like book character friends.
Yes. Yeah.
That'd be
Let's
cool.
do
I
it.
like that.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Write it down. That's happening.
Okay. Good
All
stuff.
right. Speaking of friends, thank you, my friend, for this wonderful conversation. And our 3.5 friends are watching this. If they want to check out our archive, where can they go?
Well, I would assume they had a split screen going and they were probably already on the archive, but just in case, it's bit.ly/read_this_now.
Yay!
Did I get that right?
You did. Perfect, as always. Thank you, my friend, and happy reading, everyone.